The Marlena thing. I don't know anything about them, but you say she and that Marlena transitioned, which I assume means that they started out as a gay male couple. As I discovered some years ago, there is, amongst some gay men, such a thing as a fetish for the idea of feminizing and castrating a younger male. There are online communities dedicated to this fetish, and they do their best to find victims. And when I hear about a much older partner being supportive of his younger male partner transitioning, giant flashing red klaxons go off in my brain. It is completely possible to manipulate someone into thinking they're transgender and that it was their own idea. I'm not saying this is what happened, but if it was, that is an abusive relationship to end all abusive relationships. So, my husband is 63, and I'm 29, and we met when I was 22 and he was 56, and he could be a part of a secret group of gay men looking to forcibly transition young victims. Or not. This is a video about finding love in all the wrong places, or at least the places I was told were wrong.
Isn't that amazing? It just works out.
What works out?
Well, haven't you ever heard that the girl is supposed to be half the man's age plus 7?
Is this movie romanticizing a predatory age gap?
And, an off balance of power, like that can happen in people who are the same age.
They all say, oh, he's gonna die soon.
We are all very judgmental human beings.
Age gap relationships are inherently inequitable.
When I was a teenager, I loved Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers movies. I just loved movie musicals, romantic comedies. I loved love. I dreamt about falling in love, just like so many people do.
It's more than an experience. It's sort of like a romance, isn't it?
But the thing was, I was only into severely older men. And I think when people hear me say that, they assume that was just a part of my sexuality. But no, that was my sexuality. To the point where as a teenager, I didn't even know I was gay for a long time because I wasn't into teenage heartthrobs of the day. So when I turned 18, I started dating the men I was into. I dated around through my college experience, but it was mainly with men who were in their, ranging from late 30s to early 70s. Like I said, I was into severely older men, and purely by my own volition. And in 2017, I messaged John, the man who's now my husband. We went on our first date at a park in New York City and ended up talking for almost 4 hours, and I texted a friend afterward to say that I think I just went on the best date I've ever had. I was still finishing up school in Rochester, so I'd drive 5.5 hours to New York City on most weekends to visit him. And after a year of dating, I asked him if he'd be fine with me moving to Berlin, and he said yes. The following week I proposed, and 7 years later, he's finally moving to Berlin to join me. But I'm not making this video to only talk about how much I love John. I'm making it because recently we were featured in an article on Them about intergenerational relationships, and I saw a lot of responses that I'm honestly just used to at this point. But things have changed in recent years, and though I used to just brush off rude assumptions about my marriage, in the current political climate, I feel more of a responsibility to respond. I think it's really important to be careful about conflating "this thing makes me uncomfortable" with "this thing is morally reprehensible." And though I see parallels between that discussion and queerphobia, bringing that up before has gotten me some interesting responses that honestly just reinforce why I think it's so important to talk about this in the first place. For me, accepting my attraction to older men has been a similar experience to accepting my queerness. Both situations involved learning to embrace things about myself that I can't change despite society pressuring me to. And if I were to follow other people's preferences, like dividing the older partner's age and adding 7 to find the lowest age for an age gap, at 29, I still wouldn't be able to be with my husband. So I asked my audience what they think. I thought my openness about my age gap marriage would skew the results among my subscribers, and maybe it did. But I also noticed that many people who shared their perspectives seemed like they would not be okay with my relationship, with many people saying that age gaps are only really fine after ages such as 25 or 30, with many citing brain development, which isn't as clear-cut as people want to make it seem. But even though I disagree, I can understand the urge to want to find something objective, something concrete to base maturity and adulthood off of. But it doesn't seem like that exists. Those concepts are cultural and have fluctuated throughout history. I define adult as the legal definition of over 18, but I purposefully didn't say that in the polls because I wanted to see what others thought, and it seems like many people meant different things. And raising that age brings into question other markers of adulthood in society, such as getting tattoos, getting married, voting, drinking in many countries, etc. But someone did say that it would be okay for someone to enlist in the military, despite not being able to consent in a large age gap before 25, meaning that, hypothetically, someone could potentially kill someone before being able to kiss a grandpa. I honestly don't really know what to make of that, and when I see similar arguments be used to limit trans rights, the parallels are clear. So it's arbitrary, but that's why we have some type of line, a concrete legal definition to mitigate abuse. But that isn't a perfect solution. I could talk about abuse that was forced upon me before that line, just like I can talk about abuse I experienced afterwards in relationships I willingly entered. Just like I know people who have suffered in non-age gap relationships, and people I know who have suffered as the older person in an age gap relationship. But when people talk about age gap relationships, I often see people using their personal experiences, either with abuse or just growing old, as justification for judging the relationships of others. And I understand that. I mean, after all, my personal experiences have shaped a lot of my perspective on this. But for me personally, my experiences in adulthood don't affect my views on consent. At 29, I can feel how much I've grown in the last 7 years and can empathize with comments saying that a lot happens in that time. But I still think there was nothing wrong with me being in a large age gap relationship out of my own volition when I was 22. When people talk about age, they speak about it as if it brings an inherent power imbalance. And I think refuting that with infamous phrases like age is just a number is willfully missing the point. I think age, like positions of authority, finances, citizenship or immigration status, housing, it's something that can affect a relationship, but it's not indicative of some inherent dynamic, let alone a power imbalance that compromises one's ability to consent. And I think if the goal of these discussions is to mitigate abuse, the focus should be on that. When I realized how much I was falling in love with John, I felt very insecure. I was finally experiencing this earth-shattering love that I had always dreamed about, but with the age gap came confronting mortality in a way I hadn't before. What if he dies before me? What does our love mean? I basically wrote an entire album processing those questions. What I came to realize is that life is uncertain. Anything can happen at any time, and not taking the opportunity to love someone in such a deep, intimate way just because of what others consider quote-unquote normal would be such a shame, because you really can't live your life for others. And I've already tried and failed at doing that anyway. When I was going through possibly the worst breakup I've ever been through, it was really difficult for me to find support to actually understand what went wrong in that relationship, because most people said that the reason it failed was because of the age gap, and that my takeaway should be that I need to be in more normal relationships. I've since learned that wasn't true, but at the time I took that advice really personally and felt a lot of shame. And as a result, I tried dating someone around my age, but it didn't work out. And if he's watching this, you know that I love you. You're still one of my dearest friends. But I couldn't pretend my sexuality was something it wasn't. That wasn't fair to me, and it certainly wasn't fair to you. And I now know better than to think that loving someone in a way that others might not understand could be a bad thing. I'm comfortable now with who I am, but I wanted to make this video for who I used to be, because it would have been so helpful back then to understand that there was nothing wrong with me. When I was still struggling with these feelings, I wrote a song about a time I went to a karaoke bar with my partner at the time. I'll never forget being there and texting a friend, asking him why I was just so weird. I mean, why was I 20 dating a 50-year-old? Was it because of trauma or something else in my past? Why do I feel the things I do? I never found a reason, but I learned that you don't need one.
So look at us and look at me, but don't reach in. Don't reach in me, but if you do, don't tell me what's inside or why it's there, 'cause I don't care. Oh,